stopped working completely. John was promoted and now makes enough for us to live comfortably without my salary. I mostly stay at home, caring for our 2-year-old twins and managing the household. Most of the time, I am not dressed. Although John recently suggested that I'll need to start wearing clothing at home soon because the kids are growing up, and it would be weird otherwise. However, for the time being, I only dress when we leave the house or have company around. I still answer the door naked for deliveries. Deborah's still married, sure. She was also fired, but no one expected her to face serious consequences. She had great influence over her husband. She'll just find another job and her life will go on as usual. Life is not always fair, yes? Right. Marcus wasn't the subservient pushover that everyone assumed he was. When he had gathered all the proof, he became outraged. I've had a terrible 6 months, but it's nothing compared to hers. When he felt she'd had enough punishment, he served her with divorce papers. He was tormenting Deborah. He was secretly liquidating all their assets and protecting them. He gave her the house after refinancing and claimed all the equity, then disappeared. She lost her home and all her money, but she did manage to find another job. It paid only half of what she had been making previously. In addition, she earned a bad reputation. She still goes on dates, but the men are only interested in one thing, getting in her trousers. She isn't dating right now because she still needs to finish another month of antibiotics. You may wonder why I tolerate this predicament, or maybe you find it humorous that I'm getting the penalties I deserve. If you're outraged because John didn't abandon me, know that I thank God every day for his mercy, even though I know I'm deserving otherwise. I must endure because I simply cannot imagine life without the love of my life by my side. Yes, John punishes and degrades me, but he still loves me. I maintain the right to depart whenever I want, and John has promised me fair treatment in the event of a divorce. Nonetheless, I declined his offer. He is an excellent father, partner, and spouse, and I want nothing more. I became so obsessed with the idea of a female-led marriage that I lost sight of what was genuinely important. Instead of finding fulfillment in an equal partnership, I've adopted a submissive role toward my husband. It was not the road I had envisioned, but I'm satisfied with it. Here is the next story. My name is Lester Anderson, and it's been 1 year since my world broke into a million irreparable pieces. To say it simply blew up isn't fully correct. I played an important role in its demise. I orchestrated its destruction and then walked away amidst the commotion, aided by perhaps 60 accomplices who participated in the deception. My wife, regrettably, was one of those conspirators, and there was a sick joy in seeing them all brought down alongside her. Prior to this seismic transformation in my life, I was blissfully clueless, a happy husband, madly in love with his wife, basking in the bliss of our joint existence. Our 5-year marriage felt like a dream, a comfortable household, cherished friends and neighbors, successful careers and supportive families. Financially secure, we were creating a future together. But it took an unexpected turn. I wish I could provide some rationale, a thread of logic to help untangle the mystery of our relationship, but the reality escapes even me. She was my college sweetheart, kind, witty, and affectionate. She never demonstrated any signs of adultery, flirted with other men, or dressed provocatively. I never questioned her faithfulness. I work in a research and engineering facility that specializes in cutting-edge electronics for prestigious clients, such as the National Security Agency and the military. We affectionately call it Geek Central. The odd thing about us geeks is that, while we thrive on the complexities of our professional lives, we keep things refreshingly simple at home. What you see is what you get. There's no elaborate deceit because, simply, we're not adept at it. Some may perceive our demeanor as adolescent, and it may be interpreted as such by traditional norms. We enjoy telling silly jokes, discussing esoteric movies and literature, and delving into complex minutiae. Regardless of our seeming sophistication, we don't have a high level of social finesse. However, one thing we hold dear is our dedication to honesty. In our world, honesty is not simply a virtue, it's the foundation of our reputations and, thus, our careers. Geeks don't lie. We recognize how important our credibility is, both personally and professionally. My wife, Sandra, works in high finance at Wilson & Wilson, a significant participant in financing large-scale construction projects throughout the mid-Atlantic states. Despite their considerable influence in the industry, I've noticed that many of Sandra's colleagues lack the academic credentials I'd anticipate. While they have a great understanding of financial topics and excel at spreadsheet programming, I frequently feel out of place when speaking with them. This division was underscored by an incident involving our decision to name our 2 cats, Oscar and Nat, which reminded me of my high school days. One of Sandra's coworkers recommended we use names of more well-known figures, demonstrating the contrast in our opinions. In their society, it appears that prestige and conformity reign supreme, leaving me feeling like an alien. Sandra and her colleagues excel in navigating the complex webs of finance, where every detail is thoroughly documented. Personal ambition frequently takes precedence over individual integrity. The unease I first felt among Sandra's coworkers grew during the office Christmas party at the adjacent Marriott Hotel. In the midst of free-flowing beer and mingling masses, distinguishing between employees and couples became increasingly difficult. Overhearing a woman casually mention her work husband reminded me of Sandra's professional circle's collective worldview, in which connections are created for selfish gain and loyalty is sometimes transitory. While I didn't harbor enmity for them at first, incidents like this quickly undermined any pretense of goodwill I previously held. It was an unpleasant comment that took me off guard. My first thought was to turn around and identify the speaker, but a sudden desire to remain unnoticed overcame me. Stop, listen, don't react. Blend into the backdrop. A voice in my head insisted, "We'll all get the next week off." "I suppose we'll be fine without crossing the street," one of the women remarked, eliciting laughs from both. "You could always make up a tiny account emergency," another added, drawing even more laughs. What exactly did they mean by crossing the street? Were they implying that they'd need to return to work during the Christmas party festivities? The ambiguous discourse made me feel uneasy. Regardless of my discomfort, I reassured myself I made the proper decision in marrying Sandra. Whatever they were implying, it couldn't be good. With that, I pushed the uneasy feeling aside and resumed the festivities. For the next 3 weeks, the episode faded from my memory. However, on a Friday evening, as I mounted the carpeted stairs from our basement, I heard Sandra's voice above. "All right, I'll take care of it." "What exactly is the point of having a wife?" she chuckled. "Wife? What's that intended to mean?" I pondered aloud. I turned the corner just in time to see Sandra hang up the phone. "What was that about?" I inquired, trying not to seem accusatory. She was visibly shocked as I approached. "That was Martin Harris. It's work-related. I have to go into the office tomorrow, and we'll have some late evenings next week. There's an opportunity to put together a financial package for a new apartment development. They intend to use J Street Center," she explained. The memories of the odd conversation at the Christmas party resurfaced in my thoughts. "This sounds like a minor account emergency," I remarked. Sandra chuckled. "I wouldn't call it an emergency, but it's an opportunity we can't afford to overlook." I couldn't help but voice my disappointment. "We've both been working long hours this year. I was hoping we could take things easy this month and spend more time together." "Please, sweetie, don't be upset. These opportunities don't come around often. You must seize them while you can, or they slip away," Sandra reassured me. "I'll make it up to you." Her mention of wife caught me off guard. "What about the wife talk? I assumed you were my only wife." "How many husbands have you had?" I joked, attempting to bring some humor into the talk. Sandra's face flushed with astonishment as she realized I'd overheard her. Trying to hide it with a smile, she reassured me. "Only you, silly. It's something we say in the office. We joke that we see more of our work partners than our real-life partners at home. It's simply some office comedy. Everybody says it." Despite her attempts to reassure me, her trembling palms revealed her underlying anxiety. "I'll go in for a few hours tomorrow to get things started, and then we'll spend the rest of the weekend together," she promised with a forced smile. The rest of Friday night passed calmly, and Sandra left for work on Saturday morning as if it were any other day. She was dressed casually. However, our planned weekend together didn't begin until after 7 in the evening on Saturday night. Please don't misunderstand me. I value hard work and understand the necessity of fulfilling deadlines. However, what bothered me was the air of concealment that permeated our marriage. I couldn't avoid the notion that our relationship was much more secretive than I had previously assumed. As I waited for Sandra to arrive home on that Saturday, my thoughts turned to this newfound awareness. Despite constantly exchanging work-related stories and anecdotes, I suddenly realized Sandra had never revealed anything substantial about her own job. It dawned on me that she had created a significant barrier between her job and home lives, a divide I'd never fully recognized before. When my wife finally returned home on Saturday night, she went directly to the shower while I started frying some steaks. Despite my efforts to concentrate on cooking, my mind remained fixated on that uncomfortable wife remark. Even if it was intended innocently, it irritated me. 2 phrases from the Christmas party kept repeating in my head like a broken record. One was work husband, and the other was crossing the street. I couldn't stop thinking about whether these statements had literal or figurative meaning. Given Sandra's office location, I couldn't help but consider the possibilities. Across the street were 2 noteworthy buildings, one a large medical office and the other a Marriott hotel. It seemed to me that many of the attendees at the Christmas party appeared to be intimately familiar with the hotel's layout, which sparked a flurry of worrisome thoughts. While I tried to justify their regular visits as business lunches or client accommodations, My foul mood sent my thoughts down worse lines. That week, feeling an intense need for a break from the lamp, I made the deliberate decision to eat my lunch in the privacy of my car. As fate would have it, my parking spot was perfectly positioned just a block away from my wife's employment, giving me a clear view of the street that connected her office and the Marriott. What happened before me left a bad taste in my mouth. Around 11:45 in the morning on Monday, shortly before lunch, I noticed numerous couples walking across the street and disappearing into the Marriott. By 12:30, the couples had quietly returned to their separate offices, not a single 3- or 4-person group, but rather pairs. While I didn't see my wife among them, my anxiety grew. The next day brought a similar sight, different couples but the same questionable behavior. I considered continuing my investigation by studying the hotel lobby, but the chance of being recognized, particularly by Sandra, put me off. In a desperate move, I did something I never thought I'd do. That very afternoon, I hired a private detective named Tristan Howard. I briefed him on what I had seen and explained my desperate desire for answers, providing him with a photo of Sandra. His counsel was both confusing and disconcerting. Don't linger on it. Return to your normal routine and trust that if there's something to be found, it'll be revealed eventually. Though I expressed my hope that my suspicions were unfounded, I returned to work, dealing with a flood of emotions. My investment in his services paid off on Thursday morning. He sat me down in his office and told me the hard truth. My greatest concerns were confirmed. On Wednesday morning at 11:45, my wife entered the Marriott lobby with Martin Harris's arm wrapped around her waist. After a brief pause at the registration counter, they were given a key and ascended to the 4th floor, where they remained until around 12:40. Tristan, with his ability to obtain inconspicuous information, had a private talk with the desk clerk, shedding light on a depressing reality. My wife and her supposed work husband were regulars at the hotel. This revelation came at a low cost of $1,300, according to Tristan, who warned me that collecting incontrovertible evidence would cost more. Despite my emotional struggle and self-loathing for harboring such ideas, I vowed to seek concrete evidence, even if it meant diving into the darkest recesses of my mind to accomplish this. Tristan recommended a plan that included desk clerk participation and targeted room leases. He would determine which room my wife and her colleague would occupy on their next visit, renting out nearby rooms to install unobtrusive video surveillance. It required additional expenses, including a bribe, but I was determined to spend whatever it took to find out the truth. The last 7 days have been excruciatingly unpleasant. I tried to separate myself from Sandra as much as possible, but she couldn't help but notice my strange behavior. Dismissing her questions with vague references to work, I doubted she believed my feeble justifications. Despite my best efforts to preserve a sense of normalcy, my sadness was evident. When Sandra indicated a desire for intimacy, I grudgingly agreed, convincing myself that if I hadn't discovered anything substantial yet, there might be nothing to find. However, while we made love, my heart was heavy with a mix of rage and despair. My marriage seemed to be crumbling in front of my eyes, but I lacked clear evidence and a logical explanation for my worries. Tristan's call from the clerk only confirmed my worst fears. He reserved the room for the next Wednesday morning and evening, and I found myself sitting in his office on Thursday morning, clutching the evidence that had devastated my world. Watching the heartbreaking 40-minute film of my beautiful wife, the center of my existence, engaging in intimate actions with her alleged work husband, Martin Harris, left me completely shattered. During times of turmoil, a geek's mind can travel down unexpected avenues. I remembered an old story about a man finding his wife's infidelity and threatening her lover with a revolver, warning, "Don't laugh, you're next." But I promised to keep a sense of order amidst the mayhem. They would suffer the consequences of their betrayal, and I would muster the courage to walk away. Before tackling the matter head-on, I knew I needed some time off. Being under the same roof as Sandra was smothering and awful, so I scheduled the remainder of the week off, alleging a need to be at Wallops for the weekend. If someone questioned me, I quickly packed a suitcase, left a letter, and set out on a journey westward. Fortunately, I had a childhood buddy, Lucas, who was living about 1 hour past Baltimore and generously volunteered to house me for the weekend. I heaved a sigh of relief, knowing I wouldn't run across Sandra at home. In my current state, I couldn't imagine finding normalcy. It was all I could do to keep my emotions under control, to collect my thoughts and develop a strategy. Ironically, leaving that message was the first time I had lied to my wife, and it weighed heavily on my conscience. But in that moment, escape was critical, and I wasn't ready to show my hand just yet. As I drove west, I found myself asking fundamental questions about the woman I knew so well. Had she mastered compartmentalization to the point that she could rationalize having 2 husbands? One thing was very clear: my wife had confused trust for naivety. I was never naive, and misleading a husband who had complete faith in her was no easy task. The era of blind trust was over. My marriage was in shambles, awaiting its ultimate demise. Childhood buddies have an incredible ability to see across decades. They know you inside and out, your history, present, and innermost thoughts. There's no hiding from them. Within minutes of my arrival at Lucas's house, he read the turmoil on my face and delivered the awful news. His reply reflected my own boiling rage. But it was his wife, Tiffany, who persuaded us to control our fury and address the problem rationally. She didn't defend Sandra, rather, she encouraged me to think about my aspirations and avoid behaving rashly. A woman's perspective is frequently required to gain a true grasp of the social dynamics at play. While my rage was centered on my wife and her supposed work husband, Tiffany's emphasis widened to encompass the larger backdrop of the workplace. In her opinion, it was the women who wielded power over sexual dynamics, whether actively partaking or turning a blind eye. Men are pigs. It's up to women to civilize them, she remarked, sharing a knowing smile with her spouse. He reluctantly agreed. I want to take them all down. I'm divorcing my wife. That deceptive, unfaithful woman has betrayed me, and it's evident that this isn't her first crime. I want to inflict harm on all of them. I want to make Mr. Martin Harris regret ever being born with a shred of dignity, and I want every adulteress in that office to rue the day they decided to break their vow, I declared. Tiffany sought to rationalize my rage. Be certain you're fully prepared for the consequences. There could be things at play that you're unaware of. Perhaps she'll be filled with remorse and never repeat her deeds. You adore this woman so much that you wanted to marry her. Do you really want to toss everything away now? Think about it. Reluctantly, I presented the damning proof, and we both watched the film. Martin Harris was a mere pencil pusher. His domain was finance, while I focused on nighttime runs. He indulged in lavish dining excursions. Martin Harris was anything but menacing. For 40 painful minutes, we witnessed my wife submitting herself to her alleged work husband. It was a soul-crushing experience. She smiled and even laughed while I felt like my world was collapsing around me. As the video ended, a heavy silence fell over the room. I turned to Tiffany for advice. How long should I ponder this? I asked, desperate for answers. She merely shook her head, pulled me into a loving embrace, and began silently making dinner. Lucas had followed a legal career, which struck me as ironic. Nonetheless, he remained a devoted buddy, and for that, I forgave him. His wife, a high school science teacher, had a fairly analytical mind. Over the weekend, we had numerous chats, and with their amazing support, I began developing a strategy. I called Tristan and explained my plans. It came at a cost, but with patience, it was possible. We established a method for dividing my wife's office into two groups, management and people directly associated with Sandra, about 10 people, along with their respective work spouses. My intention wasn't just to sear them, I wanted to destroy them. The remaining employees would bear the consequences, albeit without depleting my money. Tristan would surreptitiously place cameras in the offices of management and the targeted co-workers, while the others would be captured on video entering and exiting the lobby. When it came time to file for divorce, I would sue the corporation, revealing all of the employee spouse's transgressions. Throughout the weekend, I worried about whether I had missed the warning signs. There must have been signs, I reasoned. She never seemed cold or uninterested. She was always supportive. I shared information regarding my work. Could she really live a parallel life without regret? Was she possibly a sociopath? Her nervous reaction when I confronted her about the wife remark on that fateful Friday indicated that she was well aware of right and wrong, or at the very least aware of the potential implications. I couldn't understand how someone could maintain such deception without having a nervous breakdown somewhere in the midst of their thoughts. A worrisome thought occurred. By leaving town, I unintentionally gave Sandra and her supposed lover the perfect opportunity to use our home for their illicit rendezvous. Anger flooded through me before I realized the futility of lingering on it. In the larger scheme of things, their deeds were insignificant. I had already decided to divorce her, regardless of her current actions. I resolved to leave for bed out of sheer realism and determination to reclaim what was rightfully mine from the rest of the home. She was more steely than ever. I braced myself for the upcoming deception as I drove home on Sunday night. To save money, we decided not to film the work spouses in their hotel rooms more than once. With the exception of my wife and Mr. Harris, this lowered the amount of room rentals and the time required by Tristan's crew. When it came to Sandra, I wanted to minimize the potential that she might dismiss her acts as a one-time occurrence. In barely 2 weeks, we accomplished our goals. Those weeks were awful. I enjoyed every moment. Some may wonder if one instance was sufficient for retribution. While my desire for vengeance would have stretched beyond Sandra and Mr. Harris, I aimed to reveal the entire office's culpability, individuals who were aware of my wife's infidelity but chose to remain silent. Discovering their deception took longer. Most work spouses made weekly vows, with some visiting the hotel across the street more frequently than others. While we didn't catch them all, we captured enough to meet our objectives. Sandra and her accomplice adhered to a strict Wednesday routine. To keep myself away from the discomfort, I feigned working late several evenings. However, the pain of being home was excruciating. I created bogus emergencies that required me to travel to Wallops on Thursdays. However, in actuality, I spent those nights in a hotel near my business. On Friday nights, I found solace in visiting Lucas and Tiffany once more. On Monday nights, I returned to the motel to escape the misery of home. Sandra began to complain about feeling neglected, and our relationship deteriorated. She had no idea how deep that shell went. Despite her efforts to preserve a sense of normalcy at home, I was emotionally detached, which showed in her manner. Seeking refuge, I moved to the guest room to sleep and made a point of leaving the house early every morning. After all, I had my own deadlines at work. Perhaps Sandra sensed the pressure in her marriage, or perhaps she accepted my flimsy justifications, or maybe she just didn't care. Regardless, it didn't stop her from having Wednesday lunches with her work husband. If anything, their lunch breaks appeared to lengthen. It became clear that infidelity was common at her employment, with a sizable section of the personnel, including several top executives, engaged in extramarital affairs. The rot began at the top, as the phrase goes. Months later, upon reflection, I saw a glaring omission in the 3 videos I'd watched. They didn't mention me once. Neither he nor she spoke negatively about me or felt the need to defend my honor. What stung even more was the fact that she was wearing her wedding rings throughout those encounters, a silent monument to her disregard for our marriage. It was as if I were invisible or non-existent in that element of her life. While there was a sense of warmth between the two lovers, it felt hollow, a lack of genuine intimacy as one would anticipate from a committed relationship. They were more than casual partners but not true lovers. The instant I saw my wife and her work husband waltz through the lobby, his arm clutching her waist, on their way to their rendezvous, I knew the marriage was beyond saving. Watching them engage in their tryst reaffirmed that there would be no place for debate, justifications, or tired cliches. I was determined to end not only our marriage but also her entire workplace. I had no desire to hear her apologies or see her tears, and the idea of it being purely about sex was repulsive. 3 encounters would demolish any illusions about her fidelity. My lawyer diligently drafted the legal documentation, and Tristan handled the rest. On Monday morning at precisely 10 a.m, a process server walked into Wilson & Wilson's offices, serving Sandra and Martin Harris at their desks. With methodical steps, he went to the CEO's office and served the corporation itself. It's almost ironic in retrospect that the CEO, Simon Wilson, was complicit in the identical infidelity I tried to uncover. At 67, he had a trophy wife who was half his age. What compelled him to seek solace in the arms of a 45-year-old secretary is a mystery to me. My phone kept buzzing at 10:20, but I silenced it without hesitation. Meanwhile, 5 of Tristan's operatives began distributing manila envelopes to the genuine spouses of all firm employees. Some received images, others videos, along with detailed reports that they could use in divorce proceedings. Martin Harris's wife was handed an especially large envelope. For others, a letter served as a wake-up call, informing them about the unsavory actions taking place at Wilson & Wilson and urging them to confront their husbands when they returned home. Each envelope carried a brief note. In the spirit of transparency, thank you to Sandra Anderson for bringing this to our attention. I couldn't help but wonder how many allies my deceitful wife would have by Tuesday morning. Wilson & Wilson's demise was sudden and dramatic. Following my complaint against the corporation, a flurry of 20 additional legal lawsuits emerged. Divorces spread around the office like wildfire, destroying even couples with little evidence of infidelity. Management's attempts to fire employees affected by the scandal exposed their own culpability in the mess. Innocent people fled, rushing to repair their shattered reputations. The media jumped on the spectacle, and within 2 weeks, a story detailing the firm's demise prominently used the term work spouses. I couldn't help but wonder about the origin of that phrase. Perhaps it was invented by a naive husband who was unaware of the reality of corporate culture. Following the controversy, business decreased and the office closed within 2 months. For nearly 1 year, the once bustling skyscraper remained strangely vacant. Eventually, I found myself sitting across from Sandra in my lawyer's office. Tears flowed down her cheeks as she struggled to express regret. After weeks of receiving angry texts interspersed with denials, pleadings, and failed attempts at bribery and negotiation, she finally accepted some responsibility for her conduct. She blamed her misdeeds on the attraction and environment of high finance. I tried to understand the link between her infidelity and the financial sector, but it was clearly embedded in the society. However, her apology was short-lived. In an odd turn of events, she tried to shift the responsibility onto me, claiming that my failure to communicate my worries led to the issue. Ridiculous. You shouldn't have to tell your spouse to avoid extramarital affairs, let alone cultivate a work husband in the first place. Sandra's infidelity remained a confusing mystery to me, and she never provided an adequate explanation. All I could tell was that she had experienced a tremendous metamorphosis. The previously bright-eyed and seemingly honest woman with a passion for business had transformed into a deceptive and duplicitous individual, apparently led by the slogan, "What he doesn't know won't hurt him." Tristan informed me that their liaison only took place on Wednesdays during their lunch breaks, and they hadn't taken advantage of the opportunity to meet during my departure from home that weekend. It seemed as if Sandra practiced some weird type of dual marriage in which adultery was limited but not entirely eliminated. Tristan sought to justify her behavior, claiming it was a bizarre type of bonding ritual. Wilson & Wilson created a poisonous company culture in which teamwork was synonymous with close relationships among staff. There appeared to be a warped sense of loyalty at work, with employees attributing their adulterous activities to a single individual, their closest coworker. Tristan frequently suspected that they considered themselves cognitively superior. I struggled to understand the concept of sharing clandestine knowledge or assuming communal risks, whether it was a shared secret or a distorted social contract. Despite my attempts to make sense of the situation, I couldn't shake my emotional attachment to both my marriage to Sandra and the events surrounding our divorce. I had to decide if I wanted to spend my life dealing with these people's intricacies or simply walk away. Ultimately, I chose the latter. My revenge mission didn't go as planned. While I won my legal battles, the company's coffers were empty, and Martin Harris faced near total ruin in his divorce proceedings. The irony wasn't lost on me. My actions had caused both the corporation's and Harris's financial demise, rendering them unable to satisfy the court judgments against them. My wife, who had lost her job, requested alimony after her divorce, but my lawyers successfully claimed that her unemployment was a direct result of her infidelity, and she was refused financial assistance. Even the heartbroken wives who had been hurt by their partner's betrayal carried hatred toward me for exposing the unpleasant truth, putting me squarely in their crosshairs. It was an unanticipated result in a large city where I could survive without their devotion. However, one person's reaction took me off guard. Emma Harris approached me one evening in a bar, radiating an obvious charm that drew my attention. She introduced herself and sat near me, her intentions apparent. "I'm divorcing my husband, but I want more than just revenge. I'd like to confess to him that I slept with his mistress's husband. Will you help me with this quest, Mr. Anderson? What do you say, Lester? Will you defile me and help humiliate the man who deceived your wife?" After some thought, I agreed. As it turned out, I had no regrets about my decision. Sandra's family was initially angry with me, but I decided to address the situation head-on by showing them the incriminating footage. They were filled with emotion after witnessing her betrayal, offering apologies and tears. Ultimately, they exonerated me of responsibility for the divorce, though they tried to urge me to give Sandra another chance. However, forgiveness evaded me. I couldn't remember Sandra ever asking for it, and my heart hardened. For more than 1 year, reflecting on the events of my divorce, I couldn't help but feel irony. Despite my experience in high-tech electronics, Sandra's infidelity was uncovered using simple means, such as a parked automobile, a bribe to the desk clerk, and off-the-shelf tiny cameras. It was a sharp reminder that even the most advanced technology cannot prevent treachery in matters of the heart. Reflecting on how easily I discovered their deception, I couldn't avoid the thought of how easily they might have hidden their affair. After overhearing a few chats, their misdeeds were clear. Couples casually crossing the street demonstrated a brazenness that bordered on arrogance. It begs the question, does anyone care about appearances anymore? It was nearly unbelievable that they had evaded detection for this long. It made me wonder if the world I lived in resembled the reality around me. Were such occurrences prevalent in the field where I worked? Those who boasted about their romantic triumphs were typically solitary figures, their sole friend being their own hand. Once again, I found myself on the sidelines, seeing the cool kids' antics from a distance. I occasionally see Sandra in passing, whether on the street or at stores. We never speak, and I'm unaware of her present pursuits. When our gazes meet, I notice a spark of grief in hers, but I can't bear to keep her stare for long. The sight of her still pulls at my heartstrings, a reminder of the life I once had, which is now in ruins. I've rounded a corner and am moving on a new path. Like a detonator, I set in motion events that shattered not only our relationship but also my own sense of identity. Thank you for spending the time to hear today's story. If you enjoyed this essay, please like it and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have a tale to share regarding your or someone else's circumstance, please don't hesitate to contact me. Take care.